Imagine if Bitcoin becomes the only money worth anything. And then everybody's like, well, I don't have any of it. But your money's not worth shit. You got to get new money. You got to get money in Bitcoin.
That's what's going to happen.
And then there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin, right? Like the Bitcoin number is finite, right? So like maybe there's no Bitcoin for you.
Right.
What the fuck are you talking about?
That's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to.
Oh yeah, we are going to get based today as FEDNow begins deployment and Klaus and the boys at the WEF are pushing forward with the Great Reset. We're going to break down to you the 10 steps to a global government and a CBDC social credit score, technocratic dystopia, with some fire content from, of course, Joe Rogan, Tulsi Gabbard, and King 810 frontman David Gunn. We may be closer to the WEF's endgame than many think, but we do have a defense, and it's what the great Joe Rogan mentioned in the intro. It's Bitcoin and a refusal to bow to any man or government. Let's go.
That's why I stay here, cause I ain't built to run. Not from a smoking gun, not from the government, not from anyone.
I'm feeling to drive the point home, we'll start with David Gunn. This video displays what this type of dystopian future would look like for individuals and how tech companies manipulate the populace. Many of you may not know David Gunn, but he is the frontman of the band King 810, rap, hardcore punk, metal band, but very based, freedom maximalist, and Gunn is a borderline genius. Now what you're seeing behind are clips of one of their recent music videos, and Gunn did a breakdown of the meaning and purpose and symbolism behind it. So we're gonna watch and react and throw some nuggets in there. Man, this is great. All right, get your thinking caps on because David Gunn is gonna blow your mind. Here we go.
It says in the video, I'm visited by social media demigods, entities part divine, part human. The divine part would be the quantum ability to compute beyond our brain's capacity. Not divine by my definition, but we can say the algorithm might appear as divine because it's invisible. It's everywhere, it's nowhere. It can think for you, it can know what you're after before you do. It can bring forth or summon things into your purview. But it can also, as we know in today's world and as we see in the video, be unfavorable. In subtle ways, it can withhold information from.
So he talks about it being unfavorable, and we know where some people want to take this, but what he's going to do is he has 3 symbols. The TV head, you go ahead and tell me who that's supposed to symbolize, the blue bird, and also this spaz with a pink wig, and you'll be able to draw the conclusion, and he connects it to the different companies, but the damaging effects they are having on society at large and individuals. Here we go.
Highlight special interest narratives, or even if used against you, can make you quiet, silent, or invisible altogether. We know this is deplatforming. We are the human part of the demigod that is big tech in the world today. The supposed inferior part of the duo that dilutes its potential for being all that it can be. And you hear this all the time from the technocrats, the people who claim each latest technology as a modern man-made miracle. And of course they would, because the thing a nihilistic, godless society worships most is its own creation, its own philosophy, its own science. In my opinion, it's the opposite. We are in fact the divine, and this technology is a digital parasite.
A parasite that just leeches off of humanity. Remember, these are free products, so who's the product? You are. And then if you think about, if you go to 2004 to today, which was the institution of social media, MySpace started coming along, these things, and as there has been growth of social media, and this is correlation, not causation, I'm not gonna make that claim, but as adoption of social media grows, as does teen suicide, and that is the horrible truth. And also think about, since the rise of social media, just think about the divisiveness and the gradual decline of society in many ways. But let's continue.
So in the video, I live in a rundown, abandoned house with my girl. We're poor, no food, no furniture, not unlike my former life. We seem as happy as we can be given our means, and we fall asleep on the floor. In the opening scene comes an electrical cockroach. Subliminally, I probably got this from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a novel by Philip K. Dick, who I'm a stan of. They've made any story they could of his into a shitty movie, but they always have to take his quirky names like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and change them to simple Hollywood shit like Blade Runner. Oddly enough, the dystopian future story is set in present day around 2019. One idea is that animals are very rare on Earth and very expensive because most are extinct. They are a sign of prestige to have a live one, and the less privileged poor people have android versions of animals you can't tell apart from the real thing, and you never tell anyone like your neighbors if you have an android because it's shameful. Anyway, the android cockroach comes into the house by remote. The hands of this red and white demigod character with a television for a head.
I wonder who that could be.
I have no clue where the inspiration for this particular character came from. I haven't seen anything like him around. The logo, the color scheme, nothing. He resembles a guy that owes me a bunch of money, but I really don't know where he came from.
And David Gunn has a lot to speak of because his band, again, is very aggressive music, very counterculture, very, questioning the status quo. And his band has been deplatformed, they've been censored, they've been protested against, all sorts of things of that nature. So he really kind of understands what that looks like. And when you dig further into his music and to things he said, which we may do in the future, he makes these connections between intermediaries and how the dollar is a band-aid, but you must treat the cause and not the symptom. So I don't know if David Gunn's a Bitcoiner, but we are definitely in line on a lot of things. Now, here we go into censorship, but also manipulation of thought and behavior and sociology and all of these matters. And thank God Bitcoin Twitter is more of a freedom maximalist place, but we can see what it looks like on the other side.
The bug bites me though, and I go into a seizure, and I'm taken to a digital universe, and that's where it starts to get weird. So this TV head character takes me into his polygonal reality that hurts my eyes and gives me a headache and makes me sweat a lot, and it's a pretty unpleasant place. He tells me I can make an avatar that looks like me, and I said I am an avatar that looks like me, and he laughed, although I don't think he found it funny. He said I can upload my own life to the network, and I tell him I just want to live my own life, and I don't want to upload or download anything, and he said life was about
I like to draw that connection between who he's showing as kind of these technocrats pushing this dystopian future, but also the dollar in the background. These things would not exist in their form today if not for the fiat system. And if you saw yesterday the government censorship and the collusion between big tech, social media companies, and the state, we are entering uncharted territory. We are heading in this direction. But man, thank God for Bitcoin. We'll get into a lot more of this later, but let's roll.
Firing others, and I said life was about living, but he ignored me. Then he brought a friend along who was strange. He was a large blue bird, and he was verbose and never stopped talking. But his dialogue wasn't cohesive. Instead, it was a clunky, unnatural concoction of sound bites and misleading hot takes. He spoke in filibuster after filibuster, riddled with buzzwords, and I believe he was both a pathological and habitual liar. He often told me how I should think and feel, and I told him I think and feel pretty sick. He told me I was sick because a bunch of people I didn't know and would never know were harming me, but he would look after me and keep me.
And this is, again, the free speech police are out here to, quote-unquote, protect you from the misinformation, which more times than not happens to be the actual information you need, while they're the ones peddling the misinformation.
Safe, which was strange because he was a bird. Then he had another friend with him here. You see the guy with the camera lens face, and the lens is all over his body, and he was hell-bent on collecting what he called content, and I mentioned that was a pretty strange word for it because I was anything but content with his presence, but he ignored me. And they told me this digital world is way better than the real thing. They took me to a...
I love what he talks about here, and he's talking into the ridiculousness, the dystopian nature of the metaverse, of the CBDCs, and these other things, and you're going to really want to look more into this guy as he finishes up here. But this graveyard in the future, selling your grave plot as an NFT. This is where I'm getting into the guy's a genius. You listen to the music and there's one vibe, but then when you understand what message he was trying to get across or send, it just adds so many more layers to it.
Graveyard, so I thought I would feel good and comfortable. But there was no dead in this graveyard. But they reassured me I could have a funeral in the metaverse and sell my burial plot as an NFT. So at this point I was sick and confused and had no clue what I should be doing. But I felt like these characters were coming between myself and the rest of the world. I felt like they were coming between myself and the people I knew. And most strangely, I felt like they were coming between myself and myself. And just when I thought it couldn't get more bleak, I realized there was almost nothing I could do about it.
Now, you want to talk about some scary but powerful stuff, but you got to give respect to someone who refuses to be silent and gets the freedom message out and speaks their truth through their art. Now, we're going to look at a clip from Joe Rogan where he kind of lays out the slippery slope to a one world currency and a one world dystopian government.
Hoping people wake up enough to at least slow it down. Because these people are pushing in a very obvious and very specific direction. They want digital currency, centralized digital currency that they control. And they want to get everybody on a social credit score system. They'll probably connect it to some sort of a vaccine app. Or if you want to travel around, all they would need is another pandemic to try to push that shit through. And they're already talking about that. It's very spooky. Because when you look into the history of this lab and them funding it and this getting out and the way they responded to it, the whole thing is so scary because it was effective. It was effective and very, very financially effective. I mean, they made a lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
And if they could do something similar again and then clamp down more on people, that's what scares me. This talk of centralized digital currency, that's what they have in China. If you fuck up in China and you get a bad social credit score because you tweeted something they didn't like, now you can't buy a plane ticket. Now you can't buy a car.
Yeah.
Now you can't get a loan. Now you can't do something. You step the fucking line, and people self-censor because they don't want to be a part of that. And now they got you. Yeah. We know that the government was involved in silencing different voices. You know, they stopped that Hunter Biden laptop story from getting out before the election. It's so obviously dirty shit.
Watching that clip again, I kind of thought of pairing H.G. Wells' New World Order, the leaked intelligence pamphlet, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and of course a classic Behold a Pale Horse, which happens to cite Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars extensively. Now, what would the steps in place be to basically enslave humanity? First, towards a one world government and a one world currency. And this is kind of what I came up with. Now, as we begin talking about this, I want you to think about the past few years, maybe even back to 2008, the Bitcoin standard and how money works, etc. And you put the pieces together, okay? Now, this is what it would look like. There would likely be several global crises, environmental catastrophes, more epidemics, pandemics, economic instability, growing and escalating global conflicts, and it would lead people to plea for global cooperation and coordination. As nations struggle to address these challenges, it may become more rational to some that a unified global effort would be essential for survival and progress. Make sure you read The Great Reset. But this is the process that I believe would unfold to form a one world government, and it would be through these 10 steps. You got to establish international bodies. Existing international organizations like the UN are strengthened and granted more authority in resolving global issues. New organizations are also created to tackle specific challenges such as climate change, disease control, and resource management, because how else will you own nothing and be happy? Shared sovereignty. Nations might begin to cede some degree of their sovereignty to these international bodies. Take a look at the past 3 years in exchange for greater influence in decision-making and access to shared resources and tech. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Crisis unification. This is key. We just saw it happen multiple times in our millennial lifetimes and more for those above us. But a significant global crisis, perhaps a worldwide economic crisis, an unprecedented environmental disaster, a Project Bluebeam. This would shock the international community and leading to increased cooperation and solidarity among nations. Please govern me harder, Daddy. Number 4, global referendums. As the idea of a one world government gains momentum, international referendums are held that would allow citizens, and this goes back to H.G. Wells' New World Order, but it would allow citizens of different countries to voice their opinions on global governance, and the majority support for greater unity would encourage world leaders to explore further integration, as we've seen almost 100 countries now looking at CBDCs. Number 5, formation of a global assembly. A global assembly is established comprising representatives from different nations. And again, H.G. Wells' New World Order. And this assembly would become the primary legislative body for global affairs. Number 6, gradual integration. Over time, the powers of individual nation states are diminished in favor of the newly formed globalist government. And 7, we're going to build on this more in a minute, but 7, global currency and trade agreements. A unified global currency is introduced, a global CBDC facilitating international trade and economic stability, even though it's inherently inflationary and will steal from you by nature. Trade agreements are negotiated and enforced to ensure fair and equitable economic relationships among all nations. Now, I want you to take a look at this one. Number 8, shared defense and security, where someone just so happens to be the policeman of the world. A global defense force is created to handle international security threats, while individual nations maintain their own local defense forces for internal security. And then we get to number 9. Take a look around, please. Education and cultural change. Efforts are made to promote cross-cultural understanding and cooperation through educational programs. Sounds really nice, but we see what it looks like in reality. And this is in order for them to foster a sense of global citizenship. Now, rounding it out, number 10, there will be a gradual integration of regions. As regions become more integrated, they may choose to form regional governments like the EU, and these would function as administrative entities within the larger one world government structure. All right, now this is going to be Tulsi Gabbard on the Joe Rogan Experience talking about CBDCs, and we talked about the one world government. We're going to build on this, but let's go here. Then I'm going to give you the steps that will lead to the type of tyranny that Joe and Tulsi hit on here. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm concerned about all that, and I'm concerned about the lack of understanding that people have about the implementation of things like a digital currency that is centralized, that's controlled by the government.
Right.
That scares the shit out of me.
Absolutely.
Because that's what and Maxine Waters, who has been promoting this, said that we need this to compete with China, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
It's like saying we need communism to compete with communism.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you want to compete with communists, you have to be a communist. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, digital currency that's centralized by the state is terrifying because they'll connect it to a social credit score system.
Yeah.
If they connect it to a social credit score system, Tulsi Gabbard, I don't like what you said on the Joe Rogan Experience. We're going to go and eliminate your ability to fly.
Right.
You can't fly. You can't travel. You can't buy gas anymore.
Yep.
Which is what they do in China.
It's all within the realm of possibility. And you look at that, and what is the recent thing of, I think Elizabeth Warren was pushing for credit card companies to start tracking people who buy ammunition and firearms and report that to the government.
Visa is going to change the way they categorize gun sales. So they'll put gun sales in a different realm of of regular sales, which is to let people know, like, hey, we're watching you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not just because, like, oh, well, I'm just curious. No. There's a regulatory follow-up action to that violation of privacy.
And that's exactly what they aim to do. Now let's take that same formula we use towards a global government and apply it to a one world currency. First things first, Klaus Schwab and the gang, of course, they're already working on this. We had the hearings yesterday, but that involves, number 1, information control. Technocrat rulers would establish strict control over mainstream media, social media platforms, and when they did so, they would censor dissenting voices, promote their narratives to share public opinions in their favor. So propaganda and misinformation campaigns would be used to maintain the illusion of popular support for their policies. Does this sound familiar? Now let's get to number 2, social media algorithms. Advanced algorithms on social media platforms would be leveraged to control what content users see. The rulers would manipulate these algorithms to amplify content that aligns with their agenda while suppressing opposing views, creating echo chambers that reinforce their ideology. Number 3, surveillance and data collection. The rulers would deploy extensive surveillance systems to monitor citizens' online activities, social interactions, preferences, and data collected from social media, online transactions, and other digital sources would be used to build detailed profiles of individuals, enabling targeted messaging and behavior manipulation. Number 4, digital divide. The rulers might intentionally create a digital divide, limiting internet access or imposing restrictions on certain segments of the population, and this would control the flow of information and limit dissent from marginalized groups. And here we go, finally, number 5, we're just about here, CBDC implementation. Technocrats would introduce a CBDC as the sole official currency, gradually phasing out physical cash. And this currency would be tied to each individual's identity, enabling extensive tracking of financial transactions and spending patterns. And what Tulsi and Joe were talking about, the social credit system. A social credit system would be implemented where citizens' behavior, opinions, and loyalty to the regime are continuously assessed. Those who conform to the ruler's ideology would be rewarded with access to certain services, benefits, or privileges, while dissenters would face punitive measures, financial restrictions, or social isolation. Number 7. Oh yeah, the big daddy state would have to send out digital rewards and punishments. The CBDC system would allow the rulers to implement targeted economic policies. Individuals deemed loyal or compliant might receive financial incentives, while those critical of the regime could face economic penalties or frozen assets. Please see Canada and that cuck Trudeau. Number 8, online disinformation campaigns. The rulers might use the CBDC infrastructure to fund online disinformation campaigns against dissenters, further undermining their credibility and public support. And the whole end game of this social credit CBDC system. 9, manipulation of economic activity. By controlling the flow of CBDC, the technocrats could manipulate economic activity and allocate resources to their buddies in specific industries or projects that align with their vision, further consolidating their power and influence. Now, kind of a little doom and gloom, but I'm here to pick up your spirits because in the tumultuous tapestry of history, governments have wielded the power to plunder their citizens through the insidious tool of inflation. Century after century, hard-earned wealth has been silently eroded, and dreams of prosperity remain elusive for the masses. But amidst this dark backdrop, a ray of hope emerges: Bitcoin, a revolutionary force that stands to break this age-old cycle of monetary oppression.
If you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
With its fixed supply, Bitcoin defiantly resists the whims of politicians and central banks. It boldly declares that no entity shall create it at will, nor manipulate its value to serve their narrow interests. This scarcity, this resolute defiance against the age-old tricks of inflation, is what sets Bitcoin apart as a beacon of freedom. Forged by the collective will of the people, it stands independent of government and intermediaries. No borders can contain it, no walls can restrict it, and no single authority can lord over it. Now, before it is too late, let us imagine and together build a world where money and state stand apart. As Bitcoin steps forth, it calls upon us to question the very essence of money, to envision a future of boundless potential. In this realm of true financial freedom, the shackles of government control are shattered, and the spirit of human enterprise will be unchained. Borders may blur and bridges emerge as individuals across oceans, continents connect and transact without the encumbrance of intermediaries. A borderless world where opportunity knows no bounds, where prosperity is not confined by the narrow alleys of nationality or jurisdiction. The desire to be free and Bitcoin plant the seeds of a revolution that stirs hearts and ignites minds. The power of Bitcoin as it liberates money from the clutches of state manipulation calls us toward a future where freedom reigns supreme and prosperity becomes an achievable reality for all of us. Let us dare to continue to question the status quo. Let us seek a world where wealth remains untainted by the ravages of inflation. The CBDCs, the technocrats. Let's champion a movement of financial emancipation, and together we can shape a destiny where Bitcoin blazes a trail to a brighter, bolder, freer future for generations to come. But you have to find that desire within yourself to take back control over your life. Embrace freedom and refuse to be tread upon. Peace.
In the streets with the people, they're the only ones I trust.